is one of the...
All right, you could see Robbie behind you.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
I'm thinking we do Ratana Sutta.
Very good.
It's been a while since we did that.
The full one, yeah. You know, there's a shorter one for Paritas.
I don't know the shorter one, so yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Oh, there are people here.
There are people. There's nobody in the participants list, so it might be people that don't have accounts. Tell us in the chat if you can hear us, if everything's going good or well. Hello, Daniel. Very good. Thanks for the audio check. Oh, Sergey, hey, good to see you. Is Lorraine there with you as well? Ah, very good. Hey. Friends and supporters from Bhavana days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they in the Bhavana area?
I don't think so. Virginia, I think. Virginia. Yeah. All right. So we're just waiting a little bit. We're going to start off as we always do with some chanting. But we're just going to give it another minute or so for some more people to arise or arrive, one or the other.
Hello.
Hello, Bella and Gautam. There's Adriana. Adriana, we can't start without you. You're like the master of ceremonies.
There's that enthusiasm, all pumped for Palooza.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what a master of ceremonies does. Gets everybody pumped for the ceremony. All right. I think we've got enough people. I think we can get started. All right. So if you'd like to follow along with our chant, we are using the Maggaseka chanting book. And if you don't have a copy of that, you can grab it there. And it's page 41 that we're starting on, Ratana Sutta. One of the oldest Parita chants.
Actually, one of the Parita chants that was used very intentionally the very first time as a Parita for Sawati or Vesali, one of the major cities, was in the middle of a bunch of disasters. So the Buddha had Ananda chant this, going around town chanting this for their well-being.
I don't think I've ever heard the origin story of Ratana Sutta.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. All right, so let's get started with our chant. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yani bhutani samagatani bhumani va yani va antalike sabbeva bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi sakkacca sunantu basatam. Tasmai bhuta nisametta sabbe mettang karota manusiya pajaya devacharato cha haranti ye baling tasmahine rakata apamatta yang kinchi vittang idava horang va sage suvayang ardenan panitang nano samangati tatagatena idang pibuddhe ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati hotu kayang viragang amatang panitang yadajjaga sakyamuni samahito natena dhammena samatti kinchi idang pidamme ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati otu yang buddha setto parivannai sucing samadhimanantarikan yamavu samadhinatena samona vijjati edang bidame ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati otu ye puggala atta satang pasatta chattari etani yugani honti te dakkineya sugatassa savaka ete sudinnani mahapalani edang pisange ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati hotu ye supayutta manasa dalena nikkamino gotama sasanam hi te patipatta amatang vigaya ladda muddha nibbuting bunjamana edang pisange ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati hotu yatinda kilo pataving sitosya chatubhi vatebi asampakampyo tatupamang sappurisang vadami yo ariya saccani avecca passati idang pisange ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati hotu ye ariya saccani vibhavayanti gambhira panyena sudesitani kinchapi te honti busappamata nate bhavang attamang adiyanti idang pisange ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati hotu sahavassa dassana sampadaya tayasu dhamma jahita bhavanti sakkaya ditti vichikiccitancha silabattang vapi adatti kinchi chatuhappayehi cha vippamuto cha chabhitanani abbabokattum idang pisange ratanang panitang etena saccena suvati hotu Kinchapi sokam karoti papakam kayena vacha udachetasava abhabbo sotassa patichadaya abhabbata dittapadassavuta idang pisange ratanang panitang etena satchena suvati hotu vanupagumbe yata pusitagge gimhane mase patamasmin gimhe tatupamang dhammavaranga desai nibbana gamming paramang hitaya idang pibuddhe ratanang panitang etena satchena suvati hotu varo varanyu varado varaharo anuttaro dhammavaranga desai idang pibuddhe ratanang panitang etena satchena suvati hotu kinang puranang navang natti sambhavang viratta citta ayatike babasming te kina bija avirul hichanda nibbanti dira yatayang padipo hedang pisange ratanang panitang etena satchena suvati hotu yani dhabutani samagatani bhumani va antalike tathagatang deva manusa pujatang buddhang namassama suvati hotu yani dhabutani samagatani bhumani va antalike tathagatang deva manusa pujatang dhammang namassama suvati hotu yani dhabutani samagatani bhumani va antalike tathagatang deva manusa pujatang sanghang namassama suvati hotu etena satcha vajjena dukkhavu pasumentu me etena satcha vajjena bhayavu pasumentu me etena satcha vajjena rogavu pasumentu me. All right, now we'll do the English for those of you who don't know Pali, which I'm sure is most of you, including I couldn't tell you exactly what the English is either. And I've been chanting and studying this for a long time. Oh, I'm just checking the chat here to see if we've joined anybody. So, hey, Aiden, hello. Okay. And so let's do the English. Whatever beings are here assembled, whether terrestrial or celestial, may all these beings be happy, and listen closely to my words. Pay attention, all you beings. Show kindness to the humans. Day and night they bring you offerings. Therefore guard them diligently. Whatever treasure is here or beyond, or precious jewel in the heavens, none is equal to the perfect one. In the Buddha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. The calm Sakyan sage found cessation, dispassion, the deathless, the sublime. There is nothing equal to that state. In the Dhamma is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. That purity praised by the Supreme Buddha, called concentration with immediate result. That concentration has no equal. In the Dhamma is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. The 8 persons praised by the good. These 4 pairs are the gift-worthy disciples of the well-gone one. Gifts to them yield abundant fruit. In the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. With mind well established, free from sense pleasures, firm in Gautama's teaching, On attaining their goal, they plunge into the deathless, freely enjoying the perfect peace they've gained. In the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. A post firmly grounded in the earth cannot be shaken by the four winds. So is the superior person, I say, who definitely sees the noble truths. In the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. Those who comprehend the noble truths, well taught by him of deep wisdom, even if they were slightly negligent, would not take an eighth existence. In the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. For one who has attained to vision, three states are at once abandoned: view of self, doubt, and clinging to needless rules and rituals. Freed from the four states of misery, he cannot do six kinds of evil deeds. In the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. Though one might do some evil deed by body, speech, or mind, he cannot hide it. Such is impossible for one who has seen the path. In the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. Like woodland groves in blossom in the first heat of summer, so is the most excellent Dhamma that he taught, leading to Nibbana, the highest good. In the Buddha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. He, the best one, beyond compare, knower, giver, and bringer of the best, taught the most excellent Dhamma. In the Buddha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. Their past is extinct with no new arising, their minds not drawn to future birth, their old seeds destroyed, their desires no more growing. The wise go out just like this lamp. In the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. Whatever beings are here assembled, whether terrestrial or celestial, gods and humans revere the perfect one. We bow to the Buddha. May there be well-being. Whatever beings are here assembled, whether terrestrial or celestial, gods and humans revere the perfect one. We bow to the Dhamma. May there be well-being. Whatever beings are here assembled, whether terrestrial or celestial, gods and humans revere the perfect one. We bow to the Sangha. May there be well-being. By the power of this truth, may suffering cease for me. By the power of this truth, may fear cease for me. By the power of this truth, may illness cease for me. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, friends.
Maybe we can blow that up.
Adine. Hello, Adine. Like Salah Hadin. All right, let's see. Okay, friends. So, welcome to Dhammapalooza. Another Monday night, another Dhammapalooza. For those of you who are new, every Monday, as long as I am in a place that has internet and I'm able to do it, we do Dhammapalooza here. Now, I am in a kind of a nomadic state, so I'm in different places for different lengths of time. I'm lucky enough to be here currently at the Indonesian Vihara in Queens, New York. And I'm very lucky enough, this is the first time, even though Dhammapalooza we've been doing it for a year, because I'm here with Bhante, I'm able to actually have, we're able to be lucky enough to have 2 monks here for Dhammapalooza. And unfortunately, that's only going to last another 2 weeks because I'm only going to be here another 2 weeks. And then after that, you're just going to have to be stuck with me.
You could have a picture of me.
Yeah.
Put it.
But what we do here at Dhammapalooza, it's a 2-hour Palooza of Dhamma, right? This is a festival, a grand event of Dhamma. And so we try to do a little bit of everything, right? We started out with chanting. It's become a tradition that we do a little chanting in the beginning. We also almost always like to do some guided meditation. Other than that, it's free form, which means that each Dhammapalooza is going to be different from the other ones. So what I like to do is normally if there's a Dhamma session right? There's a Dhamma talk, and we're going to give you a topic that we're going to talk about and things like that. And that's something that's easy to do. We can do that. Bhante and I have given many talks on many types of different Buddhist topics. So that's nothing new to us. But what I like to do personally is, especially for Dhammapalooza, is to make it more of a community group togetherness, right? So that means that you can have conversations in the chat, right? You can talk in the chat. That also means that we'd like to have you guys be the ones who kind of set the tone and the topics for this event. So what we do now is we'll leave it open to you guys. If you have any questions you'd like for us to answer, if you have any topics you'd like for us to talk about related to Buddhism, meditation, monasticism, right? If you have any questions or topics, then now is your time to put those in the chat and we can address them, right? So we're going to give you guys a minute or two here to, and we're going to check the chat. And if nobody has anything to add, no questions, no topics you'd like to hear us discuss, right? Nothing like that, then we'll go into a sutta, right? Even though we leave it up to you guys, I always have some tricks in my, up my sleeve, just in case there's nothing.
I can verify. I see them all lined up there.
Yeah. So let's see. James is here. Welcome, James. Reed's here. Welcome, Reed. James says, throw some Pamuto on the wall, a little picture. Yeah.
Well, you'll have a wall, yeah? You won't have to do this out in the...
No, yeah, I'll have a wall. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. James shoots a question right off the bat. Thank you, James, for breaking the ice. Any advice with cultivating the perception of cessation? CAN 332.
Perception of cessation, if I remember in the 10 recollections, there's a stock phrase, and it's something like, this is peaceful, this is sublime, that is the stilling of all formations. That's all you get. The Buddha says this is incredibly beneficial to cultivate this. But how to really... Well, one simple way of doing it is something like autumn. You just go out there at the end of the year and you see all of the life that was kind of brimming in summer is disappearing, and you really get that sense of all the things that you identified with in the natural world, all of these structures that were formations that they arose in the spring, and now they're kind of falling away, and the heat is going away and the light is going away. And just reflecting on that can bring a sense of like stability to the heart, because even though you are watching things end, it doesn't have to be like a threatening experience. There's something quite beautiful in the autumn. That's actually my favorite season. Just for that sense of stillness that starts to settle in after all of the hustle and bustle of summer. That's just one example.
Bhante was right on the ball. Here, Ananda, Bhikkhu thinks thus: this is peaceful, this is sublime. That is the stilling of all activities, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. Yes, that sounds like relinquishing of all acquisitions, letting go, right? That's what this is about. It's about letting go, cessation, right? And also understanding, right, that we understand when we see something with vipassana, we understand how we see the arising and the cessation, right? So this is a deep meditation, a deep practice in understanding the reality of things, right? We understand that because something arises, it must cease. Like the old Ajahn Chah story where he uses the cup, right? His favorite cup that he says, this is broken already, right? That's perception of cessation, right? That's understanding. This is one day it's going to be gone, right? So you understand this is, you understand not only the arising, but the ceasing. And then the Buddha says that if a bhikkhu could obtain such a state of concentration, he would have no eye-making, mind-making, or underlying tendency to conceit, i.e. I am, right? That's the power of this, to understand this practice. Oh, we have some chat jumping, but Robert has a question. I'd like to practice Apostita, but I live with family who isn't supportive of my practice. How necessary is fasting afternoon?
It's really hard if you're not around people who want to support you in that practice to keep it. That's why we often we need to develop community. Like that's the supportive community, is when you know on that day that you can kind of draw close to people who are going to support you in that practice.
It's interesting how necessary. So maybe it's two separate comments that I'm connecting together. But so if you live with family, is it something like they require you to be at the dinner table or something like that, even though you're not going to eat? I don't know how the fasting thing would be an issue. It would be one thing if you're like, I need to eat this and you need to make it for me. That would be something. But to not eat, that's an interesting thing. I don't know. But much of practicing Apostita has nothing to do with other people. Right, it's you taking on extra precepts. You can. It is beneficial, like Bhante said, to be with other people. If there's a temple that you can go to for Apostita, right? That would be can be a beneficial thing. But if not, then really it is just about you and your precepts and how you choose to spend that day.
It's something we do because we're always practicing the Apostita precepts. Just as monastics, we don't eat afternoon. Is if we are sitting with people in the evening, it's not like we're like, nope, I'm not going to have anything. If I have to sit here, I'm going to sit here in complete defiance. But we get a cup of tea. So they're a nice cup of tea. And when you're practicing the 8 precepts, the tea becomes so much sweeter because you don't have a huge meal. You just get this cup of tea. And there are a few things that you can have, like cheese or candies or chocolate, like little, they were tonics in Ayurveda. So the Buddha allowed these things in the evening because they're basically just fats and oils and sugars, basic components for the body. So there's been many a day when, because everybody sits around at like 5-6 p.m., that's the time to socialize, is my family would just give me a little plate of like cheeses and chocolates. And that would be, it would be a joke to them. But in some ways, it starts with a joke, but then they begin to really appreciate that I'm keeping my precepts and I'm being sociable.
Yeah. Reed says, aside from the day-to-day observation of the Noble Eightfold Path, being mindful, guarding speech, etc., what did y'all's daily practice look like? Chanting, walking, and sitting, what else? So for me, what did my daily practice look like? So I guess it kind of started waking up early in the morning. And I what I would do was my mornings pre-work or pre-driving to work were essentially Dhamma and exercise. Like that, those were my mornings, right? So I would be up and I would go to the, the CrossFit gym or go for a run or go do whatever exercises. And then after a shower and as I was preparing for the day, right, I would be listening to a Dhamma talk, right? I'd be listening to Ajahn Brahm, Thanissaro, whoever I could find on YouTube or, something like that. And I'd be listening to a talk, right? Just to starting my day with good, exercise, good Dhamma listening, right? And then the last 4 or so years before, going to the monastery, I ended up kind of having a system where I would go to work early to meditate at my office before work. And that was really my main meditation for the day because of the nature of my job and just the nature of energy and everything in the evening. I never could make it I never could actually be a consistent evening meditator. It just never worked out for me. But my mornings pre-work were basically all Dhamma and meditation. And so that's how it worked out best for me. And I would go to work, before I started doing this, because when I started this job, I wasn't a Buddhist. But before I started getting into this mode, I would arrive like everybody else, like 9:15, 9:10, just kind of moseying on in, and then once that switched, I would get there at 8:00 every morning. Right. And I'd meditate outside. Unless it was really pouring rain, I always meditated outside. I did sitting meditation, walking meditation, warm, cold, it didn't matter. And that was the grounding for my day, right? Listening to Dhamma, getting in some good physical activity, practicing my meditation. That set a really good basis for me to keep my calmness and my sanity for the rest of the day. And then basically when I, every month and a half to 2 months, I would go to Bhavana. I would leave the state and I would go, even if it was just for like a 4-day weekend, which is mostly all I could do. Except for, I had my 2 weeks of vacation a year and I used those 2 weeks for 2 retreats at Bhavana, like 2 1-week retreats. And I would just take I had so much overtime backup comp hours that I would just be like, okay, guess what? I'm taking a 4-day weekend and I'm getting the heck out of here. And I would just go to Bhavana, right? So cause I didn't have any Buddhists or community or Sangha near me in my daily life. Once I had my online Sangha on the Buddha Center on Second Life. And then once I found Bhavana, I had my quarterly Sangha, go to Bhavana at least once a quarter. I think in 3 years, I went there 14 times. So that works out to every couple months going there. And so that was essentially my lay practice for a bunch of years. When it became consistent and stable. Before that, it was kind of figuring out what worked for me, and I was just kind of all over the map.
Yeah, it's really good. Well, I didn't have that kind of lead up before I became a monk. I was in the military, and when I got out of the military, I grabbed a backpack and I started traveling for 8 months because I had a ton of money saved up for hazard pay. And so I pretty much went straight into monasticism to be blunt about it. So there wasn't much lay practice. Like as soon as I knew it was possible to be a monastic, I'm like, yeah, no, it's like, let's do that. But now last year, I got very sick and I disrobed and I got a job where I was working 2 or 3 days a week. That got me enough money to be able to pay for medicine. And so I had already had 10 years of monastic training. I don't know if it's very fair to kind of equate that, but I was a lay person and I was living often by myself. And I made a point of waking up, 5 or 5:30, brewing a pot of coffee, sitting down, drinking the coffee, and then meditating. Like that was how I started my day. And yeah, if I was working at 9, I still got up early because I know if you try to push it and you try and squeeze into meditation, the meditation is the thing that gets squeezed. You can't squeeze out like taking a shower or getting your stuff ready or eating breakfast. The meditation is always what gets squeezed. So I leave plenty of time for that. A nice spacious morning before I went to work. And then when I did work, it was often like a 12-hour shift. So I get back and I'd just be toasted. But if I wasn't working, then it was much like a monastic day. Yeah, it still started out in the morning with the meditation and the chanting, but then the afternoon would tend to be this kind of gradual. I would keep the 8 precepts, and I'd have a cup of tea and some cheese and chocolate. I would read something. I'd maybe watch a few YouTube videos, something simple and relaxing, and then sit in the evening and get a good night's sleep so that I could wake up the next morning and be ready to practice. Yeah. So I did that for about a year before I came back because, yeah, you're already living like a monastic. Why not just become a monastic again?
One thing that I will say is I never did any chanting as a layperson. I, in my early days of Buddhism, like talking like 2007, 8, 9, when I kind of didn't have any like strong focus and I was trying all kinds of different things. Like I had an altar and I had even like the Tibetan, like the, all the little gadgets and stuff like that. I thought they were fun, but I just kind of, over time, I just kind of let go of all of that. I haven't had a Buddhist altar since 2008, maybe 2009, and not as a layperson nor as a monk. And I didn't really do any chanting per se. And I also never did. I didn't have this concept of a posita either, or like what you do for apositas and things like that. So I never did any of that. And I did try to live life as a layperson with the 8 monastic precepts. It lasted me about a month. After about a month, I was like, no, this is.
Yeah, the first time around, it was hopeless. Like when I found out about these, I'm like, there's no way this is going to work in lay life.
Yeah. So that's a very long explanation to that question, Reed. Oh,
so it makes me think for my year away, I kind of call it my gap year. I had a girlfriend who was in the Hindu tradition. Like she's American, but she spent a lot of time at Krishna temples, and so the altar and the chanting was a really big deal for her. And I really appreciated that. So when I disrobed, I was given a Buddha statue, and I really made a point of making a nice altar and keeping flowers on it and having the candles and the incense every morning. And I found that even if I didn't get this sense that my meditation was going anywhere, because as a layperson, you don't get that same sense of progression in your meditation. You more feel like you're kind of treading water a lot of the time. With the chanting and the ceremony, there was still that kind of devotional quality that kept the mind really bright. So you say, I really did appreciate that. I'm really glad I took the time to do that. Even a little thing like offering flowers can really brighten your mind because, there's nothing that says you have to, but it's nice.
So Brian has a question. How can one use mindfulness to combat anxiety-induced procrastination that is preventing one to act on things that need to be done and choosing what is easy and soothing instead? My answer to this would be when you practice mindfulness, you start to see the reasons why you're doing it. And you can pick up on the cues early enough over time, not right away. You have to practice it enough that you actually start to really understand the the mechanisms behind why the procrastination is coming up and the anxiety. And once you start to do that, you actually can kind of hack into that cycle and try to apply different, techniques and methods to interrupt it, right? So that you actually do have, you don't have the anxiety and the desire for procrastination. This is your last line is preventing one to act on things that need to be done and choosing what is easy and soothing instead. So I'm sure that something that I've noticed in myself that I'm sure most of you understand is, right? Your mind, you say to your mind, okay, now we got to get down to this, right? And you notice a little resistance, right? And then your mind comes up with, says, oh, maybe you should check your email instead. And then before you know it, you have your phone on and you're checking your email, and then you get onto Twitter, and then you're doing this, and then like 15 minutes later, you come back and you're like, oh, wait a second, I was supposed to be doing this, right? So when you start to see that, the trick is to become mindful and aware before you get lost in that distraction, right? And maybe you have to kind of give your mind a little bit of what do they call it? Carrot and stick. Like maybe you have to be like, okay, we have to do this, but then we're gonna do it for X amount of time, and then afterwards we'll do something fun. Or like it's almost like working with a child, right? You have to kind of give them a little bit something to like look forward to in the future for them to get through the having to do their chores or eat their broccoli or whatever, right? Our mind is that way, right? So sometimes you do have to kind of, when you understand, and this is what I mean by the techniques of hacking the system, right? Like understanding how it works, and you're just, then if your mind can be like, oh, okay, well, we just have to get through this and then we can do that, right? And then all of a sudden your mind stops giving you so much resistance and you can get it done, right? So, but you have to kind of see the system, you have to see the cycle to be able to hack it. If you don't see it, then you're just a slave of it. You're just a prisoner of it. And you're just going to keep going around in that cycle over and over again. So that's what that's why mindfulness is so important, to be able to see that what you're doing. Instead of being on autopilot, right, and just going along with the autopilot, mindfulness allows you to take a step back and realize, oh, wait a second, we're on autopilot, and we're like going to slam into this mountain, right? Let me take myself off of autopilot, right? Now, taking yourself off autopilot's not easy, but practicing mindfulness, practicing satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness, this allows you to see the cycle, see the system, see what's happening, so then you can act on it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the question is good. You can use mindfulness, but to understand, you don't have to just use mindfulness. Like, even though we're Buddhist and like mindfulness is like this supreme thing, you can use tricks like that. I mean, you can make a checklist and say, okay, I need to do something on the checklist before I can check my email. You can check those things that are your soothing go-to distractions and like say, okay, no, we're not going to do those during this hour, and kind of limit yourself to stuff that needs to be done. But when you're using mindfulness, as Bhante used the sense of feeling like a slave or feeling like a prisoner, and these are the hindrances. To develop mindfulness, you're catching the hindrances as they arise. And when you do that, it's it only works when you're seeing the cause of the hindrance. So you catch yourself going to that distraction, and you're like, okay, well, what was the thought right before this? And that's when you start to get, okay, both of those things that you mentioned, like the sense of, okay, something really needs to be done, that's restlessness. And, oh, I just don't have the energy for this. And that's sloth and torpor. So when you catch yourself in those particular thoughts, just say, okay, yeah, okay, that's a thought. Yeah. And don't go with it. Don't act on those particular thoughts. If you're telling yourself something really needs to be done, be like, okay, yeah. But then go look into your checklist. Like just make a checklist and let that like be in charge rather than these restless thoughts. That sort of thing. And yeah, we're all doing it. Like we're all human beings because we have the five hindrances. So that's the whole thing. That's the whole program.
Yeah, mindfulness is not magic, nor is it something that exists by itself within a vacuum, or at least it shouldn't. In the Buddhist tradition, in the Buddhist practice, it exists within the framework of a total practice. And a lot of, and in many suttas, the Buddha will give you these kind of tips and tricks on, you have to be mindful to see it. And then you can, read a sutta and see, oh, okay, so the Buddha is telling us to try this, right? And also it's being open to, psychological tips and tricks is important too, because that does, at least in my practice, understanding psychology and understanding how certain things are done outside of the Buddhist sphere before becoming a Buddhist, and since that actually helps me so the mindfulness allows me to see, but I still need the psychological habitual tips and tricks and hacks and all these kind of things, whatever you'd call them, to actually put it into place, right? So that's the importance of that. So Daniel's saying, I notice while living with others and fasting afternoon, I still cook for people, and it makes the cooking of a meal more an act of love and not just an act to feed yourself. Oh, yeah. You can use it as a dana and as a metta.
That's great. And definitely when I was cooking for others, which I really liked to do, I put a lot more effort into it. If I was cooking for myself, it's just like, it's just food. I'll just feed myself. No big deal. Throw some cheese and some bread. It'll be good. But yeah, it becomes something really beautiful when you're making something for someone else.
Yeah, it reminds me of bhavana, like when I did cook some lunches, but mostly I cooked breakfast, and when I would like break out like the pancakes and the eggs and stuff for people who were visiting, they loved it. It was like, oh, and so that actually made me feel good too. And also I liked it too because it tasted good. But it is nice to, you do get a good feeling for cooking for others. Just comments. Oh, geez, another jump. All right, here we are. Reed says it's his bedtime and he has to go to bed or else his wife will ground him, so he's leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Good night, Reed.
But otherwise, good night.
All right. Brian says, kind of like when we notice we are distracted during awareness of the breath meditation. Yeah, basically.
It's the exact same thing. That's coming to know the hindrances so that your mindfulness can be steady. When your mindfulness is steady, you'll do things in like a linear fashion. It's the hindrances that have you going off in other directions.
Briar Rose says, eat your veggies so you can have dessert. I'm telling you, as somebody who knows a decent amount of what the mind is, and as somebody who has worked with children for most of his life, the mind is basic. Like in many ways, the mind of a child is like so straight and honest and just like blunt like that, right? And we have that mind within us, but we have all these other layers, and so we think that we're kind of like more advanced in many ways, right? But then when you really look at it, it's like no, your mind is like a child. Your mind is, and so the child is having this mind that is like, well, why can't it be like this? Why can't it be like, I want this, right? And your mind is that way too, because you're deluded. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Like I can vividly remember having this like image of this realization of my mind, like when I moved to the monastery, and it was like my mind was like this moping child in the corner that couldn't understand. Like if you had to tell the child, I don't want to go dark here, but like I've had to talk to a child like when their parent dies and things like that. And like, you know, like they ask these questions like, why? Like, you know, how? Because they can't understand it, right? They can't grasp it. And so my mind was like, we can't play games anymore. We can't watch a movie. Like it was like this innocent child that's like so like, but why? So it's like I see that, you know, you can see that in your mind. Like the mind just does not want to let go. That's the way it is. Thanks for the autopilot metaphor. Oh, Brian's a military pilot. Oh, wow, we have very good. Yeah, autopilot. All right.
It's a funny metaphor though, if you really get deep down into it, because autopilot on a plane, you click it, right? It's going to keep you level and moving forward. But autopilot in your mind will have you do the exact opposite. You do this and you do this and you do that and you do that. And oh, I don't like that. And oh, I want to get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe the mind is more like fire and forget. That's like, yeah. Instead of guided. Right? Using all these military, we're using military metaphors in the grand tradition of the Buddha, who was a military person. And if you read the suttas, you see military similes all over the place. So I don't know, Brian, if you know my stories, most of my youth and adulthood and early adulthood, my plan was to be a military pilot. So I have a long story about that. We can talk about that another time. But got to remember when you both mentioned mindfulness isn't a vacuum. Yeah. This is why it has, I would say mindfulness has some extra dangers if you practice it in a vacuum as opposed to within the system, right? This is why you'll see, like, I suspect like kind of secular mindfulness practices have more of a chance of people having trouble with it because they're doing it kind of outside of the system and the guidance of this is what it's for, right? And this is how, this is what it's part of. So you have these these like dark nights of the souls and like the dangers of mindfulness and all these kind of, articles that come out. And you just don't really hear about that much within Buddhism. The Buddha's not talking about the dangers of mindfulness, right?
No, not in a fully fleshed out, Buddhist practice. No, of course not. Dark night of the soul. I mean, half the time you're like giving and receiving and hanging out with spiritual companions and hearing Dhamma talks. What dark night of the soul? But you should actually expect something like that if you try to go on this tangent of like just mindfulness. Like, where does that come from? Maybe the Buddha never said just mindfulness. Mindfulness, samasati, is the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which includes a very deep way of looking at the body, an understanding of emotions and mental states, and reflecting on the teachings themselves. There's a lot to mindfulness. It has to have objects.
Robert says, I don't have much issue keeping 1 through 5 or 8. It's 6 and 7 that usually trip me up.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, 1 and 5 are, kind of basic morality. And a lot of people, they're born in the human realm. They don't really want to break those. It just makes for a miserable life. 8, yeah. Not everybody wants to sleep on a, giant 4-poster bad. So 5 and 6, or 6 and 7 rather. That's all basic sensuality. Again, we're human because we all got that. So it's what we use to work with it.
Adriana has a question. I have a question related to reads. I wanted to know how you both cultivate awareness during daily life. Not sure if there's something in particular you return to again and again.
Metta. Turn to metta every single day. A lot of stuff that comes up has that flavor of annoyance or frustration or just like subtle aversions. And often it can sound pretty convincing. Like, no, that guy is a jerk. I'm totally justified. And just having the metta there, it just kind of, it works on that hindrance. It kind of keeps you in the moment and it keeps a bit of your sense of humor intact. So that can help a lot for just staying with things when you don't take them so seriously.
Just especially while doing chores and handling stuff on the computer.
Don't handle stuff on the computer. Your mindfulness will go out the window.
So what I would say is, like, what I trained myself to do was to stop and pause and to connect with what's going on in my mind and body, right? Like, what is my body feeling like right now? Like, so it's just, it kind of like the grounding is, all kinds of stuff happening around me, but the grounding is right here, right? The grounding is what's going on in this mind and body. How is it reacting to what the stimuli of what's happening in my situation, right? And how am I reacting to it, right? So like that is like my core, kind of like when you breathing meditation, the breath is home. Like that's my core of coming right back to like Satipatthana, right back to the foundations of mindfulness. What's going on in my body, right? That's like the first thing. And then my mind. And so just to like observe, like if you've seen the little thing that I do, FMTI, like the little feelings, feeling, mind, thoughts, and impulses, like those are like those 4 things that are kind of my base. That's like what I'm looking at, right? What's going on? And so like in any situation, I can look at these things, right? What are the sensations going on in my body, right? What are my senses experiencing? How am I reacting to that? So that is like, that's my core. That's my home base. Like in any situation, I can come right back to that. So that's basically how I do it. And, because nobody, except for if they're an awakened being, is going to be completely mindful 24/7, 365. Everybody's going to get distracted, and having a home to come back to, right, when you're distracted is important. So that's my home. Robert says, having worked with preschoolers, the mind is such like a 5-year-old so much of the time. The trick is not to be led around by it. Yeah. Just like you have to, when a child throws a tantrum and tries to control you, you have to show them who's boss. And I don't mean by smacking them around, but I mean, you have to be firm, right? You can't just let the child grow up with no discipline, because you're harming the child, right? You might feel bad, like, oh, I have to be tough on the child, but actually, when they grow up to be adults, much more stable, disciplined adults, they'll thank you for it, and you'll thank yourself for it too.
Yeah, totally. A child who hasn't had any discipline will grow up kind of bitter because of it. But you see it again and again, and it's like that. That's what society really provides us. When we don't have enough discipline in something, we really value the friendship and mentorship of people who can help provide what's missing. Sort of like, and a lot of it is just that ability to hear what the 5-year-old is saying and Just hear them, like really hear them without feeling like you have to do something about it. Okay, yeah, you're upset. I understand you're upset. I'm not giving you dessert. Yeah. Yes, I would be upset too. This is totally, yeah, you can cry and whine. You're just hurting yourself. And just be there through the whole thing. And sooner or later, in which it might be later, it might be years, they'll come around to, yeah, it's not going to change the outcome. So why go through all that effort of throwing a tantrum in the first place?
And Brian says, autopilot of the mind takes you nowhere. Yeah. So Adine says, when our 14-year-old dog died, Adine made one of the common mistakes of a Buddhist practitioner. When my 14-year-old dog died, I said, whatever is born must die. I meant it as a consolation. However, others took it as being hard-hearted. Is there a more skillful way of expressing that? So this is something that's very important to understand. There's two factors to this. There's A, are they a Buddhist practitioner or not? And B, how advanced are they, right? Because you'll see in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, right, which is the sutta that documents the last couple of months of the Buddha's life, when the Buddha passes on, when the Buddha becomes fully extinguished, it says people were rending their hair and beating their breast and saying, oh, the life of the teacher is too short. The life of the teacher is gone, right? And then they say, but those who understood, like so arahants and people who are Arya Sangha, right? They understood. The teacher has told us that which arises must cease. How can it be otherwise, right? So this is not something, so you could see two different reactions, right? They're both people who followed the Buddha's teachings, but two different reactions. So you have to kind of, just like the Buddha knew what to say to different people he spoke to, because he kind of was able to judge the room, as it were, right? He understood who he was talking to. You have to understand who you're talking to when you say stuff like that. Like, for instance, if my sister were in the hospital, right, and I pulled what Ajahn Chah did, right, to some of his teachers, some of his monastic students, and I went into my room, into my sister's room in the hospital, and I told my sister, hey, Patty, you'll either get better or you'll die. And then I just walked away, right? How do you think she would take that? Right? How do you think a regular person would take that? That's hard. That's hard-hearted. Where's your compassion? I thought Buddhists were compassionate, right?
then again, based on how you dress, she'd probably be like, okay, yeah.
Well, I don't know. But if Bhante was in the hospital, or if I was in the hospital and Bhante came to me and he said, you'll either get better or you'll die. It's like, oh, thank you. Thank you for this reminder, because this is reality, right? So you have to understand who you can't say if somebody dies, it's like, yeah, it's impermanent. Even if it might be something that you're trying to kind of reflect for yourself, to kind of help you deal with it, right? That's not going to be the best thing for others, right? If it's a person who is a practitioner and who understands at least a little bit, then it might be helpful for them as kind of a guide, as something to remind themselves about. But otherwise, you have to, there requires a bit more understanding and mindfulness and compassion in dealing with people who are not practitioners.
Yeah, and to say too, it's like there's no right answer with death. Like, it's a constant teaching and it's a constant training that we're going through, and how to have our hearts open to people, even though it's going to make it hurt when they leave or when we die. There will be pain. So maybe people too were just assessing. Maybe there is grief there that kind of needs to be worked with. And maybe you couldn't even feel it right away. Maybe people are like, wait, you had this dog for 14 years. You know, there should be some grief. There should be that beating your chest and rending your hair. Maybe that's what they're expecting. And maybe because of the reflection you've done, it's going to be a more gradual, like quiet process of just coming to terms with it. And, you know, yeah, there's no right answer. It's just you keep doing the reflections and you keep looking at what's coming up. And nobody can tell you how it's going to go. And as somebody is grieving, you can't tell them, okay, now you're done. You know, you've been grieving long enough. They're going to go through it as long as they have to go through it. And sometimes people, you find out after 14 years, you know, yeah, no, there wasn't a lot of strong emotion there. No, I knew this fellow was going to pass away for years. So it didn't hurt that much. That can happen too. It doesn't mean you're hard-hearted. It just means, you know, the attachment wasn't there at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think Brian's probably talking about you saying you wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah, Brian, we could talk about that. Send me an email. We'll talk about it. Adine says, I've been reading too many suttas and not enough doing metta meditation. So I guess that's a response to his question from above. Like, has he been too dry with the suttas and not practicing enough metta?
Metta's always good. I mean, but suttas are good too. Like, you need to have the stuff in your mind to kind of process and have a frame of reference for what's going on in life. So yeah, not just a mix.
Mm-hmm. And Douse makes a good comment. Explain it to them. If you don't, people might see it as being hard-hearted. I have, if you ask my family and some of my early year like friends pre-Buddhism, really, I've always had like this kind of reputation for not showing my emotions, just being like very calm. Like, you know, like I come from a very like an Italian family, and you know, Italians, they like to yeah, exactly, right? And here I come, I'm kind of like, okay, let's be calm and let's do, you know, like, and as like, so whenever there was a fight, my sisters named me Switzerland because I was always trying to be neutral and calm and peaceful, right? So like I've had this, like, I can remember my mom, like, you know, like when it was something serious and I showed, you know, like heart, she'd be like, oh, my son does have a heart. I'm like, yeah, I do. It's just because I don't wear it on my sleeve doesn't mean. So some people are just like that, right? Some people just don't have that kind of like overly outwardly emotional persona, however you'd want to say it. And that's fine. So, and so when you're saying like being misunderstood, I know all about that. It happens.
We got to catch up on this chat.
Yeah, it's a very busy chat today. I love it. Very good. Lots of talking, people talking between each other too. That's great. Thank you. I'm glad to see it.
Did you just miss one?
No. That's just Douse explain. Yeah. Robert says, in Kindfulness, Ajahn Brahm tells this great story about a wealthy person leaving for a party and telling his guard to be mindful while he's gone. Oh yeah. And then the thief comes in and takes
the rich man comes back to an empty house.
Uh-oh.
Whoop.
Yeah.
And the guard tells him he was mindful while the thief was emptying out the place.
Yeah, I remember that.
I saw him. I kept track of everything he took.
Adine, FMTI. Yeah, actually, I have a if you email me, Adine, I can send you like the little graphic I made that explains all of that. So I made like a little graphic for people to it really came about when I was doing a lot of teaching for people who weren't Buddhist, and kind of trying to think of an easy way to kind of encapsulate the direct experience of practicing Satipatthana. And so that kind of was my amalgamation of all this stuff together. So I made a little graphic and stuff for that, a little paper, and I can send that to you.
And Robert there saying, it feels like this is how most people practice mindfulness, which misses the point. And it's like, yes, totally. So there's this phrase, spiritual bypassing, which actually might have been Trungpa who coined that. But it's that's basically what people are doing these days. They've got this juicy concept called mindfulness, and they think if they do it, they can tell themselves that they're doing spiritual practice. But we call this devotion to rites and rituals. It's just taken this ritual of mindfulness and propped it up and said, this is what will get us to liberation. The Buddha didn't teach that. He taught a broad mindfulness that sees things and knows them in context. The Buddha had samasati, which is this, it includes all of the things that you're going to be mindful of and how to relate to them. But when the Buddha used sati outside of that context, it would usually be in a compound of sati sampajanya. So mindfulness and situational awareness, contextual awareness, understanding what you're being mindful of means. That's how you're supposed to be practicing. And most people just blow by that because that could be painful. It could be deep. It could show them places where they're attached, and they're trying to use their practice to get away from all the stuff in their mind, which is not the right way to do it.
There's also this kind of stuff, like the secular stuff, is kind of on my mind because next month I'm doing these 4 talks with like these CEOs of companies that want to learn mindfulness, and I'm part of this group of monastics that's giving these talks, and I'm giving a talk like basically like on the secular stuff. And I put together this section of like 15 or 20 different organizations defining mindfulness. And one of the most common things that's in there is non-judgmental awareness. And that's not such a thing in Buddhism, right? Actually, the Buddha teaches us to discriminate, right? The Buddha says, you're becoming mindful so you can see what is skillful and what is not skillful, right? Now, they might mean non-judgmental and like you're supposed to just be watching and observing what's going on. But that can be a very tricky word because so there is more to mindfulness than just the awareness, just the understanding, right? There is also that level of discrimination, right? Of investigation, to understand what is this skillful or is this not skillful? Like, so there's some things like that that are kind of, and some of the definitions of mindfulness were just like stuff that was added on. Like, oh my, that's a whole other thing. I'm not even going to, but like, it's very important to understand the totality of which mindfulness has been plucked from and is being taught. So James is talking about how he reads the people to know what to tell them. I guess that's a response from before, which is good. And James is one of our sutta hunters, so he knows what the Buddha does and what he says. So James follows the Buddha's example there. Not a lot of people want to end suffering. Not a lot of people want freedom in one way or another. They'd rather have their servitude. That's the way it goes. Robert comes in, corporations teaching mindfulness. So this is an interesting thing. I don't know that this has anything to do with them setting up mindfulness programs, but this is actually like, so it's 4 talks, and it actually, like, the first talk is like the totality of mindfulness, like how it's become like this thing in modern world, so they kind of understand. And then the rest of the talks are like Buddhism. So it's like the first talk is, what is mindfulness anyway? And I was given the titles of these, by the way. So I was just told, you're going to give 4 talks. These are the titles. Okay, make the talks. So I've just worked from there. And the first talk is, well, what is mindfulness anyway? All right. And then the first slide says, it has some pictures of like news articles, and it says $1 billion business, just like as a joke to start off. Right. But so this first talk is going to be all these different, what mindfulness is and who defines it and all these things. And then right after, the next talk is what the Buddha said about mindfulness, right? So at the very least, these CEOs, whatever they're doing it for, again, I don't know. I was approached by senior monastics and said, do you want to be part of this group? And I was just, sure. So I don't know what the end goal of this stuff is yet. But at the very least, they're going to get the actual full totality of what mindfulness is in these talks. So that's a...
Yeah, and to say it's not impossible that even in a corporate environment, you'll find actual mindfulness properly applied. It does happen. Actually, I got an email from the medical group that I was assigned to, like in Medicaid up in Massachusetts. And because there's so many meditation centers and mindfulness centers up in Massachusetts, this medical group actually at the bottom of their email had all sorts of links to programs they've set up for people to practice mindfulness, because they saw how it helps with preventing disease and recovery and dealing with post-traumatic stress. So they've got a lot of people who are able to help them apply these tools in a very balanced way, people who understand where they come from. And another example that comes to mind is one that S.N. Goenka explains during his 10-day meditation course. And he'll talk about how his teacher, Ubakin, had been in charge of a government office and had just gotten this strong sense that he absolutely had to go on this 10-day retreat, and it didn't matter if he was going to be fired or not. He just really knew this was important. And so he went on the 10-day course, and when he got back, he found the letter on his desk, and it's like, okay, yeah. And he opens it up. It turns out he had been promoted to head of the division. Because people were seeing he valued something that wasn't greed, hatred, and delusion. He valued something that's actually really lines up with morality and productivity. And so he brought those ethics into his government department. He cleared out all of the corruption that was there, and he got people the vacation time to do actual like in-house retreats. And the department became so productive and so clean in an otherwise corrupt system that he was put in charge of another department at the same time. And there are things like that happening all of the time. So those of us that actually know what real mindfulness is, we can really appreciate when it shows up in a corporation. You know, when it does, you'll know, okay, that's a symbol that things are going in the right direction. You know, it is impermanent. It won't last forever. And big corporations have a wonderful habit of screwing things up. But when you see it, you can just be like, okay, yeah, no, I support that.
Yeah. I'm not as cynical about corporations and mindfulness as many people. I think it's a good thing in general, regardless of the intentions of the higher ups. The having at least the basics, at least, listen, you know I just railed on the secular version of it, but on the other hand, for somebody to have that kind of thing be put in their awareness, for many people, it will trigger a search for the more authentic core origin of what this is, right? Working, there was a lot of working at Bhavana, but when I lived at Bhavana, I met thousands and thousands of people, and they all came through to Buddhism. They all came to Bhavana from so many different angles, so many different avenues, right? So you don't know what will trigger a person to want to have something deeper, right? To try to look deeper, to want to have a more spiritual path, even, right? So you don't know. So, I mean, it's like sowing seeds. And like most of those seeds might not grow anything, but some of them might. So, in the end, I think it's a net positive more than a net negative. Good night, Sergey and Lorraine. Robert says, am I going to upload these talks to? No, I don't think so. They're probably like they're Zoom. So I don't think that that's going to be something on. That's going to be something that's going to be public. Dow says corporations want mindful workers, but not wise workers. Well, it depends on leadership. Leadership, if a person understands leadership, understands people, right, then they want wise workers. Why? Because then they can delegate work and they won't have to work as hard, right? A wise leader makes it so that he becomes or she becomes redundant, right? They make it so that they don't have to micromanage, right? What would be nicer if I had to micromanage 30 people under me, or I could be like, you guys got this all set. I'm going to go play some golf, right? I'd rather have it set up and just go play some golf, to be honest with you. It's better for my own sanity if I was some kind of manager or a boss, right? So it has to do with understanding leadership and people. So if you have a person who understands those things, then they'll understand what's best for the people, that they want wise people.
Yeah. Corporations actually do want mindful, wise, moral workers. It's just most of the time they don't know that that's what they want. They're looking at productivity as a standard. They're not looking at the stability of the individual who's being productive. But, over time, the people who are mindful and balanced and moral always demonstrate they last longer. They're more productive. They're more balanced. They're less corrupt. Just all the metrics are good if you pay attention.
The people that do, like a couple, like 2 weeks ago on my Facebook memories, that came a post from like 10 years ago with some of my coworker friends. Well, one of my coworkers wrote on my Facebook post, she said, Cheryl and I have come to the conclusion that you know the best way to live. So we're going to learn from you. And this was me as just a regular Buddhist person practicing in my, doing my thing at work. Right. So that can be people see these things. If you are that kind of a person, people see that and they see how you live. And like for me, it was my coworkers are, hanging out on their breaks, by the door, smoking and drinking coffee because the job is like ridiculous, right? I work Child Protective Services. And while they're doing this, I'm like walking mindfully back and forth, practicing meditation and something like that. They're like, what the heck is this guy? And what is he doing? Right? So they had questions. So like, you never underestimate the impact that you can have, on people.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for helping out Adine. That's good delegation right there.
Hey, nothing wrong with being more productive, my practice made me a heck of a lot more productive worker.
Yeah, no,
That was good.
I
Yeah.
remember one day I was on alms round and I came to a woman's house, and she kind of invited me in, and she's like hurriedly making a soup. And I'm like, oh, what you doing? He's like, I'm making a soup for so-and-so who lives on the other road. And you're going to take this to them. And I'm like, what? They're like, yes, I'm so glad to see you because I don't have time to actually take this to them. And they're sick. And she looked at me like really sternly, and you're the only one who has free time anymore. And I thought about it, and it's something I'd actually been teaching people. It's like part of my lifestyle, the meditation, the mindfulness, the gradual way of going about things actually gave me more time because I wasted less time with the hindrances.
Yes. Yep.
We are, in fact, cultivating one of the most valuable commodities on the planet. Think about it. If Bill Gates were to find out he's going to die tonight, would he not give every cent of his money to get more time? It's the most valuable commodity on the planet, and we know how to grow it.
And this is something, whenever I teach mindfulness, I tell this story, like how I realized exactly what Bhante said. Right, as I was practicing, one particular incident really stands out for me. Like I said, I work Child Protective Services. And, when you get a call or there's like an investigation or emergency, you're like, oh, God, I got to get out there. I got to get, right? So you have to prepare. So I got my case notes. I got the keys to the car. I got all these things. You had to go to like somebody to get keys, right? You can't just, you don't have your own keys. So I had to go to that person, get the keys, so my mind is like in this like emergency mode. I got case files. I got my briefcase, and I'm going to, and I get to the car and I go to look for the keys to open the door. And I didn't have the keys with me. I left the keys up in my desk, and I realized because I was not mindful, I just wasted about 5 or 6 minutes. I thought I needed to, your mind lies to you, absolutely lies to you. You're in that mode of, I don't have a split second to waste, right? But when you're mindful, actually, you realize you do have the time. I would have saved more time and gotten to the job quicker had I mindfully and calmly handled the situation and understood, okay, here, and now I have my keys. Do I have this? Do I have that? I have everything, right? And then years later, towards the end, this was the year before I went to the monastery, right? At that point, I was a foster and adoptive home recruiter. And I single-handedly put together this ridiculous, crazy, huge event with like 25 organizations. I mean, it was a madhouse doing this thing. And it was later in the evening, but this was the day of. So I'm going up and down, going to different offices, talking to different people. And I was, moving. Because it was a big event and I had a lot of stuff I needed to do. And in comes this father with like 4 kids. And boy, did he have his hands full. And I was like, and this is what I'm explaining to you happened within a second or two, but I'm explaining to you the process. So I saw this, I'm walking, I see this father coming in. I had this feeling of like empathy for this father because, and they're all young kids. I mean, they're not like, now stay still, we're going to walk. No, they're young kids for mostly, right? And so as I was walking, I had this thought, like, how can I help him? Right? And so in the middle of this busyness that I had to worry about all these things, for a split second, I had the thought, how do I help him? I saw the opportunity to help. You know what I did? As I was walking by, I pressed the elevator button to open the door. And I didn't even stop to look. I pressed the elevator button and I went up the stairs, right? Because even in the middle of that, because of my training, by that point, I took the split second time to help somebody else, right? To do something that was good, right? Because I had understood that your mind lies to you. So keep that lesson. That's an important lesson.
So I notice we have half hour left.
Yeah, we're just about ready to do our guided meditation. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Very good. Yes, exactly. Yep. Again, from gun. Either if you're a military or a gun owner like I was, you understand what that is, and that's 100%. That's one of the things I would remind myself too. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Yep. Robert says, I had a mentor in college who said you can always get more money, you can never get more time. Wise mentor right there.
Yeah, but also time is infinite. So you really wake up to that as well. It's like you have so much time. And that's the thing, when you start practicing on the 8 precepts, you often have more time than you can handle because you're not filling it with anything else. So there's a lot there.
Dow says, funny is that just one split second of being mindful is more than often enough to make a difference. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Well said. Briar Rose says, I saw a story about mindfulness practice in schools to help students. Now, if you want a real warm-hearted, what do they call the movies that like make you happy? I don't know. Warm-hearted, good, happy, tearjerker of happiness. You should look up this documentary called Dharma Brothers. It might be Dhamma Brothers.
I think it's Dhamma Brothers.
Dhamma Brothers.
Because it comes from the Goenka Church.
And so this is a documentary about meditation retreats in prisons. Wonderful. It's one of my favorite things in existence. Every time I see that, I end up crying because it's so wonderful. And you see the transformation of people and things like that. But anyway, that's enough. Okay, so we're good. That seems like a good breaking point to do our guided meditation.
And Amy, it's not a teaching. It's not like a official Buddhist thing to say time is the most important thing. It's just a clever little witticism to encourage you to practice mindfulness. If it accomplishes that, okay. But if it rubs you the wrong way, just throw it aside.
If you want to put it in a Buddhist perspective, remember, it's extremely rare that you've become a human. And most people don't become humans again in the next life. You have at max 100 years to do your best, right? So time is of the essence. Time, you don't have that much time as a human. Make use of it, right? That's what the Buddha is trying to tell you, right? To bring up this urgency to practice Dhamma while you can. So
that's a good thought. Yeah, 100 years, you'd be like, that's so much time. But how much of your 100 years have you already used up and you can't ever get back?
All right. Okay, guys. I'm not going to read any more comments. We're a little bit behind on our guided meditation, so let's get started with that. Always have some chanting and some meditation. What happens in between is different, but meditation is always important. Okay, so take a little bit of time to set your body up in a comfortable and stable position.
It's going to take me a second.
Yeah, me too, actually. I'm starting to get cramps.
Yeah,
this is what happens with sitting for an hour and a half, 2 hours. All right. Okay, so once you're in whatever position, sitting in a chair, on a cushion that you normally use for meditation, start by bringing your awareness to the bottoms of your feet. we're going to take a little bit of time scanning through the body so that you can check to see that your body is in a comfortable and stable position. When you bring your awareness to whatever part of the body, you want to come into contact with the sensations that you can feel there. What is the feelings of the feet pressing against the floor, the tops of the feet against the cushion? Bring your awareness to that sensation. The sensations will be your guide in understanding if the body is in an imbalanced posture, or there might be a small feeling of discomfort that will later be a greater feeling of pain. So we go through our body in such a way from the bottom to the top. Bring your awareness through the ankles, up the calves, into the knee. If you have trouble contacting a sensation, you can prompt yourself by asking, what do I see? What do I feel? Bring your awareness up through the thighs, then to the pelvis, hips, and buttocks. Check to make sure that the pelvis is balanced. That it is positioned in such a way that does not cause the upper body to lean or slouch. You want to set up your lower body as a strong, firm foundation so that the upper body can rest naturally and comfortably on top of it. If you are straining to keep your upper body up, not slouching, then you will simply cause back pain to arise. Straining and stretching. This is why we want to take some time to set our body up in a comfortable and stable position. Bring your awareness up through the abs to the chest. Checking that balance. Check to make sure that the spine is not being stretched or slouching, but simply resting in its neutral position, comfortable. Check to see that your shoulders are hanging loosely, not tight and scrunched up. Bring your awareness down through your elbows and hands. Check to see that they're in a comfortable position that supports the stability of your posture. And finally, bring your awareness to your head. And check that the chin is parallel to the ground. The head is not leaning forwards or backwards or to the sides. But again, resting naturally and comfortably on the upper body. The more stable and comfortable your posture, the longer you will be able to sit. So it's a good thing to take some time to do this before you sit for long periods. When you're done setting up your body, let the body go and take 3 deep breaths. And then let the breath go. From here on in, we do not wish to manipulate or control the breath in any way. This body has been breathing from the moment it was born and will continue to do so until the second it dies. It doesn't need you to do its job. Your job is to simply observe, investigate, and abide with the breath. Watch as this body breathes in. Watch as it breathes out. I will now lead you through a short guided meditation or guided reflection. The first question today was talking about reflection on cessation. It's easy to say the words like a mantra that, of course, things arise and then eventually they cease. We can have a sort of intellectual understanding of this. But this does not cause us to lessen our suffering. The true experiential understanding of this cessation this letting go that lessens our suffering. Slowly letting go until we've let go of all things. The relinquishment of all acquisitions, all attachments, everything that we consider me, mine, myself. So I'd like you to bring up a memory of perhaps an old toy that you remember from childhood. Some kind of toy or game or something from your youth that you remember fondly, but it's not there anymore. As you bring the memory up and the reflection up, pay attention to your thoughts and feelings that arise regarding this item. That is where you can see what attachment is there. Perhaps some kind of sadness arises, or happiness, or maybe a mix of both. Observe how your mind reacts to bringing up this reflection. Now skip ahead maybe to your first bike. Something a bit more substantial. Reflect on how Perhaps this first bike or this item was so important to you. How you took care of it and you treated it. And now years later, where is it? Now bring up a reflection about school, perhaps middle school or high school, the environment that you spent so many hours in, the people, teachers and children. Where are they now? What do they look like now? Who is still here and who isn't? Do you go back to that school thinking about the time that you had there that has been ceased, that doesn't exist anymore? It is in the past. Notice how the schools have changed so much. The students have changed. All that you know that has ceased. And this final reflection will be the hardest. If it becomes too much for you, then you can stop it. But if you can stay with it, keep the reflection going, it can be a powerful tool for insight. Reflect on family members and close friends that were once part of your life, but are now deceased. Their life force has ceased on this world. When you think about them, observe how your mind reacts. What is your response to the fact that this person is no longer here? Watch that. Investigate that. We can say, yes, of course, it's natural. Everybody must die. All things arise and then they cease. But when something that we love, something, someone, whatever it is, ceases, we don't take it with such stride because we're not awakened yet. Bring up these reflections as a tool to watch how your mind reacts, what feelings and emotions arise. Observe them. Okay, friends, slowly come out from your reflection. Come back to the Dhammapalooza with all of your feelings and thoughts and emotions and everything that has arisen from this guided reflection. Adine says, Dhamma Brothers is a great movie. Yes, yes it is. Robert says, watch Pay It Forward. Yeah, Pay It Forward was a good movie. Yeah, we dropped 10 people. That's not a record, though, I don't think. That's definitely not a record, but that's maybe a little bit more than average. But it does seem like we end up with about 6 or 7 people at the end. Yeah. All right. So we have 1 minute to 10. So I think we can do our sharing of merits. And this actually is a good thing when we do this chant. If you are thinking about a loved one who's passed still, if that is still raw in your mind, right? We can share our merits with them wherever they are. Dukkha pata chani dukkha bhaya pata chani bhaya Soka patta chani soka hontu sabbe pipaniyo etavata cha ameta sabbadang punya sabbadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya akasata chabumata deva naga mahiddhika punyang tang anumoditva charang rakantu sasanang. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired, for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. This might be something that Bhante is not familiar with, right? Devas, nagas, and yakas. If you are astute to the Pali, you'll notice that the yakas are not included in this. This is something that I added.
In the Pali? Oh.
Yeah, there's Deva, Naga, Mahiddhika.
Of great power, yeah.
Yeah, so no yakas. And so this is, I'm like the patron saint of yakas. If you go on the Discord, you'll see my nickname is Yaka Raja, king of the yakas, right? Because
that's you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a long story. I really like yakas. Yakas are like yakas are very misunderstood and
well,
not
actually they are in the Deva realm. Like when you do the teaching of the 6 realms, they are there in that realm because it is a more fortunate form of birth. They have more power, more choice.
Yep. So I add yakas. But so friends, we come to the end of our another Dhammapalooza. Just a couple what they call housekeeping things. So every Monday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we're here doing this Dhammapalooza. Now, obviously, after a couple of weeks, Bhante won't be here because I'll be in a different location.
Well, here will be somewhere different.
Yeah, nor will I have this nice big Buddha statue, nice background behind me. But this is the way things are, right? Things change. So also, a couple other things that I do. Monday, while I'm here and I'm, excuse me, and I hope to continue this as well. Every morning, 8 a.m. Eastern, I do what I call morning monastery experience. So we do precepts in Pali, we do some chanting, and then I give a little thought of the day. So we do like a little 5-minute Dhamma talk every morning except for Sunday. And if you subscribe and click the bell and do all that jazz, whenever I put up a new video, you can see that. You can also, if you are not aware, I do have a website that has a blog, and I post all kinds of different stuff on there. It's magaseka.org. 5 a.m. It's morning for you. Good morning. Yeah. So that's my HQ. If anything that you want to be aware of, anything new with me, it's posted there. Bhante has started up his own stuff, and he has a Zoom session Wednesdays and things like that. So I'll let Bhante explain that.
Yeah, Wednesday and Friday is a meditation at 8 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. And on Wednesday, a bunch of people from this channel, long-time Magaseka participants, and others from all around kind of gather for an informal tea time an hour before the meditation. So yes, Bhante's putting up upavana.org.
I am spelling it right?
Yep, you got it right. So you can go over to Upavana and you can, that's just where you can get all that information. There's a page for events, and then there's a link to all the Facebook where yeah, all of the stuff that we do here and all the stuff I come across gets posted there so that people have access to it all through the week. Never run out of Dhamma.
Mm-hmm. All right, friends. Until next time, Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy. May you have a very spiritually successful and peaceful week. Practice well and be well.